Hi, welcome back to Real Auto Reports. I'm Jonathan McGrew, and this is the real video, the real review of the 2013 Mercedes-Benz GLK350. It is a crossover utility vehicle, or a CUV, and we're going to give you all the details you need to know. So let's jump in the driver's seat and hit the road. Hi, so welcome back. We are in the 2013 Mercedes GLK350, and this is a really interesting vehicle because it's a car that's about almost $54,000 as tested, and it's a Mercedes, and so we're going to give you all the details about this car, what you should consider, some of the quirks it has because it is a Mercedes. It's still a German-engineered vehicle, and Mercedes has always had their own flair. So let's check it out and see what it has to offer. Okay, so what you need to know about this GLK350 right off the bat is that, of course, it is a Mercedes. And it has all the luxury features, well, at least the quality control in the fit and finish that you would expect this Mercedes to have. It's a car that really announces your arrival as soon as you get into it and you pull up in front of someone. There is no doubt that there is class and style and quality associated with the Mercedes. And the GLK represents their CUV, or their crossover utility vehicle. And this is going to compete in size, at least, with something like a Ford Escape or a Subaru Forester, all of which we've tested here at Real Auto Reports. The thing that is different about this vehicle is that the class, the fit and finish, the materials, just how it all comes together is going to feel much more like, say, a Range Rover, a Jaguar, a BMW, all of those cars that we've tested. I liken this car because the C-Class Mercedes competes with the 3 Series BMW. This is very much like an X3 BMW, and that's the level of price, performance, and quality you're going to get in this car. Now, what's interesting about this car is that at $53,500, which is right about where it rounds out as the tested price, you're not going to get all the features you might get in some of the other vehicles out on the market that compete with this, but may not be considered as much a status vehicle. So like if you get a loaded Ford Escape, you're going to have similar amounts of room, but you're going to have a ton more features. In this car, in the package that we have, you do have the adaptive cruise control. You do have things like heated seats, climate control, the navigation, Bluetooth, voice guidance, rear backup camera. However, the things you don't have, which are kind of striking in this price point, is you don't have auto start. This car actually doesn't even have a push button start. It has a real key. It doesn't have the touch entry, or the keyless entry the way that we think of it today, where you touch the handle and the door opens and locks when you get out of the car. You have to use the button in this car. Although, in contrast, you do have memory seats on both driver and passenger side. The controls are up here on the door, just like you would expect in a Mercedes. That's something that they've done for a long time. A lot of people that are older find this much easier to use because you don't have to try to get your hand down beside the seat. And generally, I think it is a much better location for the seat controls than a lot of cars. And the memory on both sides, especially 3 settings, is nice if you have multiple people in your family. Now, some other things that the car has that is nice is it does have a power liftgate. But the thing it's missing, the thing that is not offered the way that you would get in a Ford Escape, is you can't swipe your foot underneath it and open the rear liftgate. See, Mercedes used to be considered this kind of quirky vehicle, I think, in the 70s and 80s, especially with all the diesels. Then they became a real luxury powerhouse for the American population. And specifically here in the US, Mercedes are seen as very high class. They say something about you when you drive up, and they really have the looks that go with it. So But you're paying a premium for this imported vehicle. And one of the things that's interesting about that to me is that since you pay such a premium for the status and the name, the brand Mercedes, just like you would with BMW or Audi, or Audi if you want to say it the way most of us Americans do, you aren't getting the best bang for your buck, but you're getting an impeccable vehicle. So you really have to, this is a vehicle you're only going to look at if you can afford it, is basically what it comes down to. The gauges are really nice. There are some interesting things about the trip system in the center. You do get a digital speedometer, but in this center gauge cluster, what is interesting is that everything in the middle of it, because this has the standard Mercedes, big speedometer in the middle, tack off to the right, and then you've got your fuel gauge and your temp gauge off to the left. It's a nice kind of chromatic silver face. It's easy to read. The pointer is easy to use. And then you have this digital display in the middle. But what's interesting is you can only see one thing at a time. So it's very much like the Dodge system that the Charger has, or the Durango, or even some of the other Chrysler vehicles. So that is an interesting use of the system, whereas a lot of cars, you can see multiple things at once. So that's something that we wanted to point out here in this review. The other thing that's interesting, this does have navigation, but the navigation is utilized, and the entire screen here is utilized through this knob down here on the lower part of the console. It's easy to use for the driver, not so much for the passenger because it is so driver-centric. And most of the time, if you have passengers in the car, they're the ones who are going to want to play with the audio and navigation and all of those settings. And a lot of that stuff is locked out, especially in the navigation when you're driving. The other thing that is hard in this car is the navigation system itself, that interface, I find very difficult to use. It requires a lot of spinning of the knob. It just doesn't seem as intuitive as many of the newer systems, including, I think, the BMW system that's on the market. It kind of feels like at one time Mercedes was really the cutting edge in a lot of this technology. And now I'm not sure that they're behind, but the usability and the user interface just don't seem to be there. Not the way that we're seeing a lot of these touch and sync systems. And really, the German manufacturers have gone away from this idea of a touch screen, whereas a lot of the American manufacturers still have multiple ways to do things, including voice, touch, and some sort of steering wheel control. Now, that can be good and bad, and it depends on what you're used to. Now, from a driving perspective, this car drives beautifully. It does have a 3.5-liter direct-injected V6 engine, 302 horsepower going to the wheels, and it is smooth as silk. It's a nice, quiet ride. The steering is what you would expect from a Mercedes. I don't think that it's very sporty, but I do think that it is exact. Precise is another good word. It doesn't have a lot of lean going around the corners. As you can see, we're going around the roundabout here, and it's not bad. It's definitely more sporty than I think even than the Subaru Forester XT. I think it's got a more sporty personality than that. But this car is really all about the way it looks, as opposed to necessarily the way it drives. But the good news is that 0 to 60 will still come in 6.5 seconds. So you floor it, and once it finds the gear, which is a problem with a lot of the cars that are now 7 speeds, there is a much longer, it seems to me anyway, uptake to get into a lower gear. If you use the manual mode and you pre-select the gear, you're going to do your engagement much faster. And that brings me to another point. The Mercedes here has something that is very similar to the iDrive systems that they used to have in the 7 Series. That's the first place I remember seeing the stalk kind of control way back when. And this harkens back to, having a shifter up here on the column. But you press down for drive and up for reverse, and you press the button in for park. The thing is that it also has a direct shift mode, a manual mode here with the paddles behind the wheel. that is the only way that you can engage the manual system or a sport mode indeed. So if you want to drive this car in a sportier fashion, you have to use the paddle shifters. There's nothing down here in the center console. There's no gear shift in order to let you shift. And so I think that's an interesting thing. It kind of feels like they're putting that sport mode there just for the sake of having the ability to say they have a manual mode, whereas the real usability of it is kind of interesting because it's only a paddle shift and it's only engaged through the paddle shift. There's no sport mode in the sense that you see in a lot of cars, even like the Audis and the BMWs, where you can change modes and let it do the more aggressive shifting. So I think that's kind of interesting as well. From a ride and comfort perspective, the seats in the Mercedes, I think, are very comfortable. They're not as flat and hard as I find a lot of the BMW seating. It's funny, you can like a lot of different cars and you find these little areas where you're like, oh God, I love this car, but I wish it had X or I wish it had Y. And this is one of those cars that I find comfortable. It's got good lumbar support. It's got a multi-way adjustable lumbar and power headrests, and so it's got a lot of the little details that are nice and that you would expect in a Mercedes. The thing it doesn't have is tons of room. This car, feels like it should be on par with the size of an Escape and even almost a Flex, because it is a much more boxy looking vehicle. It's square in its shape, not quite so rounded as many of the vehicles on the market. And what's interesting is we put a ton of luggage in this vehicle. I had to do a run from the airport, and I had a sports duffel bag. I had boxes that had a photo studio in it. We laid one side of the split folding seat down, and it is more of a 60-40 split than a 50-50 split. So the one side is bigger, which actually worked out in our favor. But it took a lot to get 3 people, all of our luggage, and this conference luggage that we had into this car. And it took a lot of sort of pushing and shoving to get it in here. And I even had to move my seat up to get all of this in here. Now, in contrast, the slightly bigger Ford Flex, which would be in a similar price range to this and have just as many features, even though it is a slightly bigger vehicle, held all of that much more eloquently and comfortably. So, I guess what I'm saying here is this is not a value-oriented vehicle. This is about having the touches and the finish and the beauty of a German-engineered car and all of the luxuries that come along with that. And if you can afford to own a Mercedes and you like the way it feels and it likes the way it makes you feel and your family, then it is definitely a car you want to look at, because you will not find many vehicles on the market that still have this attention to detail. There's really only a handful that make something like this, and I think those are Land Rover, BMW, Audi, and then you have the Mercedes brand, and you have those 4 big powerhouses that come to mind all the time. And sure, you might find some other competition sets, but these are really the 4 main big luxury powerhouses in this sense. Now, you might say, why didn't you say Lexus? Lexus is still, I think, an interesting vehicle set because it still plays much more to the value, or at least that's how it started. So the types of fit and finish are not going to be in line, I think, with the Land Rover, Audi, BMW, and Mercedes brands. So it is an interesting thing out on the market how many choices you have and the differences all of this buys you. Great car, drives well, rides well, and looks phenomenal. If you can own one and this is a type of vehicle you like the look of, which I think is ironic because, the look of it anyway, because I think it looks kind of like the old Highlanders, but with a much better presentation. So it's definitely a vehicle that has classic and timeless design. Check one out, take it for a test drive, and see if it suits your needs. And we have to give Mercedes good credit on this vehicle. It gets a lot of attention, it's comfortable, and it does what you would expect from a Mercedes. So that's the real video, the real review of the 2013 Mercedes-Benz GLK350. This car has a 302 3.5-liter V6 engine, which really makes it move going 0 to 60 in about 6.5 seconds, according to Mercedes-Benz. It also has a pretty big price point for a small vehicle, right around the $53,000 to $54,000 mark as tested. And that isn't the high end. This car comes with a lot more options that you can put on it. So this car has the sports appearance package, it has the driver assistance package, and the leather upgrade package, as well as the premium package. And it's just a lot to say that this car is well equipped, but doesn't have everything. Like, there is no auto start, there is no push button start. It doesn't have the keyless entry the way that a lot of these Mercedes have, where you touch the door and it opens it. So it is a blend of value and of, well, still wishing that you got more for that $53,000. But it does perform well, it is 4MATIC, and we really do appreciate the way it drives and the way it performs out on the road. It's quiet and nice to drive, and you can still get a ton of luggage in the trunk, well, or in the cargo area, since it is a CUV. We'll have more videos for you coming up right here on Real Auto Reports, so make sure you stay tuned. I'm Jonathan McGrew, and we'll see you down the road.